Hi, everyone, and welcome to this short podcast series. This is really supplementary to the identity conference that we've done. So, Charmaine and myself, we are both quite practical. And we know that in the identity conference, we shared a lot of information, but we want to make it practical. So, we want to encourage you to go and have a look at the recordings, listen to it, work through the manual, because that's the foundation that this podcast will be based on. So if you haven't been to the conference or you haven't purchased the recordings and listened to it, you may have a bit of a learning gap as we go through this podcast, because the idea is to make it really practical. So this first episode, we're going to talk about brokenness and where our healing starts. So I think the most important thing we need to understand is that all of us are broken. None of us are perfect. None of us go through life without experiencing trauma. And we've got our own traumas and our own brokenness that we need to deal with. But there's also generational stuff that we inherit that we need to deal with. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, it's not applicable to me, it is. None of us have arrived. And because we live in a broken world, we will continue to experience certain traumas and trials and tribulations. And so this process of healing will continue. And I think Charmaine can testify to that it is really a process. A lot of people want their brokenness to be healed overnight. So I just want to go for one little session or a bit of counseling, do one prayer, and then, everything should be fine. But it is a process, and we should be patient with ourselves as well as we work through this process. Charmaine, anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly how it is. I think the healing journey will always be something that continues. And I think that's the thing that maybe feels a little bit overwhelming for a lot of people to think, I have to go back to those areas and I have to go and look at that, and I have to go and dig a little bit deeper. I have to put some effort into my healing journey, because I think sometimes we are a little bit passive with regards to that, just because of society and what society expects of us. So as a mom, for example, as a mom and having your own career and your job and everything that you have to do, there's a lot of balls that you need to keep in the air. And I think when we are keeping all of these balls in the air, we sometimes really struggle with this concept of making time for ourselves, taking the time to dig into, like we are now going to talk a little bit about the body, soul, and spirit, but digging into our soul area, where the traumas lie, and so that we can work through all of that to come to a place of healing and restoration. And when we do this, we are not just doing it for ourselves, but we are also teaching our children to do that. And I think that's the most important thing, is at the end of the day, we want to have a generation, we have to equip the next generation to teach them as well, how do we do this? And that this is the whole thing about the conference that we did, is because we want to equip people to step into their identity, but not just to step into their identity, but also to hand down the tools to the next generation.
That's an important key. That saying, hurt people. And that's exactly what happens because we are broken and we are wounded. We end up hurting those in our own lives. And we tend to look at our husbands and our children and our friends and our family, and we want to fix everyone because we can see their brokenness. But the key
Yes.
is really to start with yourself, to take that time to deal with your own wounds and your own brokenness, because in that healing, you're going to change. You're going to relate different to the people in your life, and you'll probably see a change in them as well. So, what Charmaine mentioned is really important, is that the first thing that I realized is that society and life today kind of turns everything upside down. We tend to read the Bible and we don't understand the Bible. And we think that everything in the Bible is upside down. But remember, God is the creator. And it's just our own perspective because of our traditions or our societies that we feel that the Bible is upside down. So the first thing we need to understand is that we are firstly spirit. Our spirit was with God, and He sent that spirit down to earth, and our soul and our bodies are merely a way for the spirit to express itself. But through trauma and through sin, our spirits have really gone to sleep. And so, what we end up doing is prioritizing the soul. So, everything is about the soul. And that's the first key that you need to understand on this journey of healing and also finding your identity. Is firstly, you need to realize you are not a soul. Everything is not about your emotions and about what you're feeling and what you're thinking and what you're desiring. We need to understand that there's a spirit inside of you, and that's who you are first. The soul and the body is just a way for the spirit to express itself. So I want to encourage you. I did a podcast on the slumbering spirit. I'll include the link in the description as well. So you can go and have a look at what causes your spirit to fall asleep. But that's really where you need to start with this journey of healing, is to minister to the spirit first and get the spirit awake. Because the ideal scenario is for the soul to submit to the spirit. And where we are all reacting out of our souls now, that's the real problem in our lives and with our identity. We need to learn how to react out of our spirit man. So, Charmaine, you actually had a Bible verse that you shared with me that was so profound. 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 23. And we can see in that, you can share it now with us, but we can see in that there we see this pattern as well, because it speaks of the spirit, the soul, and the body, and it starts with the spirit. So it's very important that you understand as you begin with this healing journey that it starts in the spirit. So do you want to share that Bible verse with us?
Yes, so 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 23 states the following. It says, may your whole spirit, soul, and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, or Yeshua. Right. So this is something that was incredible to me, and it was confirmation for me as well to understand that we need to work on all three of these areas. But the most important thing is our spirit, because the word states that we were with God before the foundations of the earth were laid. So our spirit, which knows God so well, was with Him. So that includes the calling, the destiny, and the purpose that God had for us. That's inside our spirit. But as we come into a broken world, and our parents, they weren't the best. Most of the parents also struggled with their own traumas and with their own emotions. So being born into a broken world and being exposed to that, and also because of a lot of the generations before us and even our parents didn't always know how to minister to the spirit. So as a baby, you just start to feel all of these things. I mean, it's the hormones and the things of the mom as well that's inside of her that gets transferred to the baby as well. So you are being born with trauma, or sometimes inherited trauma as well, that you need to deal with. But the other thing that I also just want to say is sometimes because of a lack of knowledge, the word also says, God's people are perishing because of a lack of knowledge. So the fact that we don't have knowledge, that we don't equip ourselves with knowledge, and if because of the fact that we sometimes don't take time to really go and dig deeper into these different things, this is also where the enemy, comes in to kill, steal, and destroy. And the trauma just gets passed down from generation, to generation. But this was Yeshua's plan. Yeshua's plan was for us to work as well with him, with his ruach, with his spirit, to work on our spirit and on our soul and on our body. Yes.
Yes. So you use a great analogy in one of your teachings that we did with the identity conference, and you spoke about this camel and all of the baggage on the camel and how you needed to unpack the camel. And that's such a great example. So I think as we finish off this podcast today, let's just talk a little bit about the practical ways that we start to unpack the camel, that we get rid of our own baggage, but also our generational baggage, because that's one of the key elements of finding your identity and also turning this upside down way of living and thinking the right way up, to live from the spirit through the soul and the body. So some of the things that I've done to unpack my camel is obviously to firstly work on my relationship with God. You know, there's so many people that you speak to that if you ask them, are they a believer or what do they believe? They'll say, I'm a Christian. It's our default, but it's actually become our culture. It's not really who you are, because you can say whatever you want, but the proof is in the pudding, right? It's in the fruit. And for many years, I was one of those believers that would say, I'm a Christian, but I didn't read my Bible. I didn't pray every day. I used to pray when the pawpaw hit the fan, then I know how to pray. But that was one of the first things that the Lord really started with me on my journey of finding my identity, is to fix my relationship with Him, is to come back into that place of intimate relationship with Him. So that's one of the things: Bible study and prayer, working through my bloodline. So going for bloodline deliverance, doing prayers of renunciation, and there are many that you can find on the internet that are free and downloads. So that's a great tool. Inner healing. That's a big one that I also found. Sometimes you need to speak to someone. You need to go back to a trauma and a memory and pray through it. See everything that you saw. Ask Yeshua to come into the situation and show you the truth, because sometimes a lot of the lies that we believe are built on those false memories that we have about a certain trauma. So inner healing was a big thing. Forgiveness, which is one of the things we're going to talk about in a later episode. And then a big key for me was obviously the quantum counseling, and that's something that you do as well, where we allow the body through biofeedback to access the information that's in the subconscious mind, because sometimes we don't have the words for what we are experiencing. So those are the few things that I can think of that I've used to unpack my camel. And sorry, got a hair. And like you said, it's sometimes people don't want to put in the effort. They've got time for a lot of other things, but a lot of people will tell me, I don't have time to pray through this prayer. But you just spend 2 hours watching TV. So there's a lot of things that we need to reprioritize in our lives to create the time, because you are going to have to invest time into unpacking this camel and to dealing with your brokenness. Any practical tips that you have before we finish off?
Yes, I would also just say, I think an active prayer life is really very important. And I think to also be aware, I think one of the things that I've learned, especially through trauma and trauma counseling, is that there's a connection, there's a huge connection between the soul and the body. And the things that's happening inside of our soul is that which is expressed in the body. And we've spoken about that also in the conference. Different autoimmune diseases and neurodegenerative diseases all have their origin in the soul. So if we don't deal with the things that's inside the soul, we will never truly be set free in body, soul, and spirit. So that's the first thing. And then also to unpack, like you said, we need to unpack the camel one bag at a time. Sometimes we get into this feeling of really feeling overwhelmed. And I found myself there a lot of times, when I'm thinking, I still need to work through so many things that's in my bloodline, and I still need to do this and this and this. But there we need to really have a connection with to trust him with our healing journey. So to build our trust with him and not rely on our own ways of thinking and our own emotions with regards to that and feeling overwhelmed. And then finding a specific time which suits your emotion best. When we have that time in the morning, that's sometimes a little bit easier for a lot of people, because at night, sometimes it's very, people have a lot of stress working during the day, so they are really feeling overwhelmed. So rearranging your life, like you said, and also having wise counsel. Wise counsel is something that's so very important. When we have problems and we want to really know what to do, we need to go and speak to people and get information from people that really lives in the Word of God, that's not operating from their own emotions as well, because that can also lead us down a path of destruction. So that's very, very important. And just to have that felt sense of safety. Because if we have a felt sense of safety with a counselor or whoever we trust, this is when the body part, has enough capacity to then start to release the trauma, because the body needs to feel that sense of safety. So we need to have an environment, even if it's just for our counseling sessions, if we do that, to have that sense of safety. And yes, there's so many different things that we can do to actually help to support the body, the soul, and the spirit. There's so many different exercises, that you can really do to bring that about in the body. And I think also we talked about that at the conference, so that people can also find a lot of information with regards to the different strategies that you can use to actually help calm the soul, so that it can really start to release the trauma as well.
Yes. So I think if we had to wrap this up now, I would basically say that the first key or the first door you're going to walk through on this journey to find your identity is to deal with the brokenness. Because the brokenness causes us to have no identity or to have a false identity. And God wants to establish true identity. He wants to show you who He created you to be. But first, we need to take away the filter of all of our brokenness and trauma that is hampering us from entering into true identity. So we really hope that you found this helpful, and we look forward to seeing you in the next podcast.